From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. It's great to be with all of y'all this Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm on the road. Yes, again and again and again. I've booking a lot of travel, but I've upgraded our sound when we travel. I hope y'all can tell it's not echoey anymore. It's much clearer, much sharper, at least with all of our testing. So I hope that comes across on this live show. The show is live. So good morning. Thank y'all for tuning in. We've got a packed show today. The economic impact of the CDK breach will be felt in the hearts of Americans for years to come. And we're going to get to that in just a moment here with more news on what's going on with this CDK breach, but as well as additional cybersecurity threats. And then how do we start to mitigate all of those as practitioners, Americans, individuals, and the likes? Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Nudge Security. You'll hear from Nudge a little bit later in the show. Make sure to go and check out, especially in the world of all of these breaches we're seeing around SaaS security. Having good insights and visibility and ability to manage your SaaS applications is that much more critical. So we'll get to all of that here in just a moment. Make sure to subscribe, follow, share, like, and most importantly, I've got my trusty CyberHub Podcast Travel Espresso mug. You get one of these by going to our Substack, jameshazard.substack.com. You subscribe there, we'll get you one of those. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. I don't like travel espressos. I can't help it. I don't like it. Not for me. I like my own espressos. All right. Let's go ahead and get started with the CDK breach. This has occupied our news feed, our inbox, and a whole bunch of stuff since essentially Wednesday of last week. So a few things about this. One, there's not a lot of more news around the CDK breach in terms of where do they stand in recovery and so forth. CDK has been very tight-lipped around it. Some believe that they are. Bloomberg reported on Friday that they're negotiating to pay the attackers. They haven't paid the attackers yet. You know, whether or not they pay them or not, that's a decision that only CDK can make. Their board of directors, their executive team, and it's going to be based on what they feel like is going to be best in order for them to try and recover from this specific attack. However, the victims of this, so CDK primary victim, all the subsequent victims of this breach, and this list gets really long. Several of these are essentially massive publicly traded companies like Lithia Motors, Group 1 Automotive, Penske, and Sonic Automotive. They've all now had to file their SEC communication saying they're all facing disruptions because of the shutdown of the systems in response to the attack. And now this is where it gets dicey. A lot of car dealerships, a lot of car parts, distributors, and service departments and so forth are all fairly paralyzed going back to the days of old. And again, going back to the days of old, meaning the pen and paper tactic here, which is often not practiced. Everyone says, yeah, we can go back to pen and paper and still do stuff, but then how do you manage it, and how long could you do pen and paper before it gets really overwhelming or before it starts to create specific weaknesses within your business operation? And here is where some information that's been brought to our attention. Several dealerships have had to slow down the pace of their sales. Essentially, if you could process 6-7 customers in financing at the same time, you're maybe doing 1 or 2. So there's an economic impact there. You're not able to get as much inventory out the door as you could. Service departments are taking longer to find parts, to understand the inventory of parts, because all of these systems are down. So they've had to revert to phone calls. I was speaking to someone at a service place who runs a service department in a dealership that's been impacted by this. And he goes, well, when we call up now, before we'd go online, we'd check the part, we know when the part would be here, we can order it. He goes, today we're calling. And here's the thing, a lot of these businesses got rid of the phone department because of CDK, because of the internet. right? So they don't have the service person. They maybe have one service person, a logistics coordinator that you call when you have a problem, but you don't have that team of 5 or 6 or 7 different customer service associates that would take orders pre-CDK. Those people don't exist anymore. So the phone times long, the ability to get information long, and all of that has economic impact. It's slowing things down. And when things slow down in an economy that's well oiled, it takes it a while to get back up. Bloomberg said that on Friday, CDK was still negotiating with the Black Suit Ransomware, which is a rebrand of the Royal Ransomware Group. They're best known for their ransomware attack on the city of Dallas last year. According to Bloomberg's internal contacts, CDK is planning to pay the ransom. The amount has not been disclosed yet. And this means one of two things. When you're going down the path of paying, you've got one or two aspects here, right? The first one is, we don't have backups. Our backups aren't viable. Rebuilding doesn't become an option. So we've got to pay to get some level of operations back, which means they didn't have a good incident response plan internally to dealing with this, subsequently with how they deal with customers. I saw several SEC reportings where the companies were saying CDK said this isn't going to be weeks, it's going to be days. Folks, we're almost a week, for 6 days that CDK's been down. 6 days. Economic impact. The economic paralysis is going to be significant. All right. And it's going to be significant for a slew of reasons. We'll get into those at a later in a later episode. I'll try to do a special episode this Friday where we kind of examine the economic impact of these ransomware attacks on companies like CDK, like Snowflake, like so many others who've really providing a service, but then at the same time, they're getting really manhandled there. Really, really manhandled. So and that impact will be felt in the economy. And here's the thing: this is impacting small to mid-sized businesses, right? So the companies that are on the New York Stock Exchange, they're going to be fine. They're going to survive it. They'll raise more money. But that small dealership that was using CDK, that instead of selling 30 cars this week, is going to sell 5 or 6 or maybe 10, or can't service their customers the same way. So customer frustration is growing. People can't get their cars back on time. Insurance companies are hammering you on the time it takes you to fix a car because you can't get the parts in play. All of that has a hint that all of that puts a price on those small businesses. So that's my monologue for CDK. Santander, also a victim of the Snowflake breach, is now reporting that 12,000 employees had their personal information compromised in that breach. This includes employee names, social security numbers, bank account information, all used for payroll. So why is payroll information sitting in a Snowflake database unencrypted? Just a question. Santander is a large enough organization. I've served as a CISO. Even in my role today, I know one thing for sure. You better have PII encrypted in a database wherever you store it. And if someone needs to be able to use it in order to data mine, do whatever, no one needs to data mine social security numbers. No one needs to data mine bank account information. None of that matters. The only thing you may need to data mine, date of birth, geolocation, and all of that data is publicly available, right? So why are you hosting this? Again, this kind of goes to the basics of practicing security. If you follow the CIS framework and you understand the need of data security and you encrypt that data at the level where you go, why do you need it? It's encrypted. Encrypt the data. Leave it there encrypted. If someone needs to access it, have them file a business case, because there's no reason. And if you can't justify it to the board, then by all means, write your letter of resignation, move on to a different role. As a CISO, your role is to, why do you need access to this data? Why is it not encrypted? Santander, this one falls on you. I can't defend that. I can't defend it at all. Ticket It Entertainment Group, TEG in Australia, is also the latest victim of the Snowflake breach. Their end, attackers made away with customers' names, date of birth, and email addresses. So Ticketed is kind of the equivalent to Ticketmaster in Australia. 30 million users have had their information disclosed there, but guess what wasn't compromised? User accounts and payment information weren't caught up in the incident, probably because they had good segmentation of data, right? I mean, there it goes. Someone knows what concerts you went to, How horrible if I looked up your social media feed, would probably find out the same. I'm not worried about that. What I am concerned with um, when it comes to these data breaches isn't it's your payment information, and it's your personal information, that your payment information, specifically your payment information here, right? No payment information, we're good, we're fine. So the Shiny Hunters cybercrime gang posted this information for sale. So you know, again, this is coming from the Snowflake breach. The reason for the Snowflake breach is 165 customers of Snowflake's were breached not because of Snowflake. Snowflake has some responsibility, but not all of it. These accounts were breached because their credentials were stolen and they didn't have MFA, multi-factor authentication, for those databases, which is the basic control. It's the Whenever I open an online account anywhere in order to buy something, the first thing I do as James, as a human being, is do MFA. First, if I'm putting payment information there, I'm using MFA. If someone could potentially go into my account and do something, I'm putting MFA. General rule of thumb. That's my best practice. And I'll use text MFA. I use the Google Authenticator app or the Microsoft Authenticator app or Duo or Ping or whatever authentication app is available. I personally use Google Authenticator. There's many others. Many companies provide you with an authenticator app. You could use that as well. But use the app over text if you can, if it allows you to do so. Indonesia's national data center has been encrypted with a variant of the Lockbit ransomware, crippling immigration services at airports, according to the country's communication ministry. The ministry said systems of the temporary national data center were infected with the brain cipher, which is a variant of the Lockbit ransomware attack. Minister of Communication Baudi Ari Sediati said to the news agency Antara that the criminals are demanding an $8 million ransom and they will not pay, and we don't negotiate with terrorists. Good for Indonesia. Good for them. The data center impacted is the one in Surabaya, not the capital of Jakarta. They've resorted to they've actually moved. Here's the interesting thing of what they did. Data centers went down in Indonesia at immigration checkpoint, causing long lines at immigration. If you've ever been stuck at an immigration line, you know how horrible that is after a long flight, especially when you're flying to Indonesia. Those are not short flights by any means of the imagination. It's not New York, Atlanta, an hour you're there. Here's the deal. They moved to a paper process and then they rebuilt the entire infrastructure into the cloud in order to get things back up and running. Good incident response plan. They had it set, got it done. That's the attack. They've moved stuff to the cloud. And now they're back up and operating. There's still long lines at immigration as they kind of get the systems back up and running to full speed and scale them. Obviously, there's a scalability issue there. But nonetheless, Indonesia, they're recovering from that breach and showing you just exactly what's going. Now to a few quick vulnerability stuff to pay attention to. Most companies have WordPress plugins on their WordPress sites. Attackers are now using these vulnerabilities in the WordPress plugins, and they're backdooring them in order to inject malicious code, which allows them to create rogue administrators accounts taking over your WordPress site. And they'll do that for a few reasons. One, if your website collects payment information, they want to do that. Number two, they want to look if your website has users create credentials. They're going to take all of those credentials, attempt to access their accounts, and do it the other way. One, if you have user information, users logging into your website at any point in time, MFA, multi-factor authentication, put it there. Number two, you got to auto patch your plugins on your WordPress site. Most security teams often overlook the site because the site's owned by infrastructure, by marketing, by someone there. But security auto-own the site, especially when it's WordPress. WordPress is known for its vulnerabilities. And by the way, it's a really, really easy management tool. FYI, many companies out there will manage your WordPress site for you, patch it for dimes, literally less than a coffee a day. All right, so do that. A P2P infection is now targeting Redis servers with crypto mining and ransomware modules. Keto Security is tracking the P2P infect for some time now. This was first reported by Palo Alto's Unit 42 back in July of last year. They were using Redis's known vulnerabilities in order to interject malware. They're now replicating Redis's essentially by doing just that. Between August and September, they increased its activity to thousands of breach attempts weekly, while also introducing features like cron-based persistent mechanisms, fallback communication systems, and SSH lockout. Despite the elevated activity, they didn't perform any malicious actions. They just created essentially a massive network. So in December, the PTP infected variant was discovered by Cato analysts, designed to target 32-bit MIPS processors found in routers and IoT devices. Cato started reporting on this in May, where they received the command to download and run a ransomware payload from a specific URL, with the command being valid until December of this year. Upon launch, the ransomware binary checks for existence of a ransom note to avoid re-encryption of compromised systems. So all in all, you want to pay attention to your Redis. You want to have visibility there, but the bill. Redis is really, really expensive. So if you see a big spike in your Redis usage, you know something's offline there beyond your usage, your actual month-over-month usage, and you can get that taken care of as well. A China-linked espionage group is targeting telecommunications and communication provider networks in the APAC region. That's the Asia-Pacific region. They've been placing backdoors, stealing credentials, and using custom malware to gain control and compromise of other systems, according to two different cybersecurity firms this week. Tools from the linked groups show that they're attacking telecommunication companies in at least two unnamed Asian nations. According to an analysis by technology giant Broadcom's Semantic Cybersecurity division, this is probably done by Mustang Panda or Nomad Panda. They've been previously associated with widespread attacks. Again, they're looking as a strong launchpad to where they can compromise other system, eavesdrop on communications, or cybercrime as well. There's a potential for surveillance there. Telecom is critical infrastructure, one that needs to be secured. Japan and the Philippines created a trilateral alliance with the U.S. in order to try and counter some of these impacts, again, by the Chinese. But the problem is, as long as you're buying Chinese technology, you're making yourself extremely vulnerable to these types of attacks. One thing you have to do is you have to manage the Chinese technology you buy, if you've got to buy it. And when you do that effectively, it'll work out for you. Our final story of the day is threat actors are now exploiting a novel technique in the wild that leverages specially crafted management-saved console files to gain full execution using Microsoft Management Console and evade security defenses. Elastic Security Labs have codenamed the approach Grim Resource after identifying an artifact that was uploaded to Virus Total malware scanning on June 6th. Maliciously crafted console files as imported a vulnerability in one of the MMC libraries can lead to a running adversary code, including malware, according to the statement. Attackers combine this technique with .NET to JScript to gain arbitrary code execution, which leads to unauthorized system access and takeover and a whole lot more. So something to keep in mind here. You want to disable the Office macros, obviously, and you want to look at additional defense techniques there as well. And now, before we sign off, a message from our friends over at Nudge Security when it comes to your idea of how to defend SaaS security effectively.
When your CEO asks, hey, are we using that SaaS app that was just breached? How quickly and confidently can you answer? Due to the sprawling nature of SaaS app adoption, it's hard to know who is using what and to understand the implications when a popular SaaS app is breached. To solve this, Nudge Security discovers and categorizes every account for every SaaS app ever created by anyone in your organization. And a full inventory of all SaaS accounts is available within minutes of starting a free trial. Not only will you know who's using what, but you can automate communications out to end users, called nudges of course, that remind them to enable MFA, shut down unused accounts, enroll apps in SSO, etc. And Nudge Security will notify you of breaches impacting your SaaS provider so you can take immediate action to mitigate the impact. Start a 14-day trial now at nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub.
So someone reached out to me yesterday. They actually did the 14-day free trial. They said they found 32 SaaS apps that had no clue people were using in their organization. So just saying, go try the 14-day free trial. Get an idea, run it. It's free, no credit card required. Our friends at Nudge Security have been very gracious to do that. So go check that out. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, I'll be live right here with more on this. So make sure to subscribe, follow us, share, comment. If you have any stories, again, best way to do that is either through our X account, LinkedIn, or our YouTube channel. You can also go check out our Substack, jamesazar.substack.com. Thank you all for tuning in this morning. Have a great rest of your day, and most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.